I felt the most incredible fear go through me. It was like a power source of some sort. I was raving hysterically. I was convinced I was face on with the epitome of all evil.
A terrifying encounter of the worst kind. Blinding lights, towering figures with blazing red eyes, an overpowering sense of menace that ended in violence, a nightmare, or an attack by aliens. Kelly Carl knows what she experienced, and all the evidence points to a UFO and its grotesque crew.
I suppose some people might compare it to being raped, you know what I mean? It's such a shock to the system that it's something you can never forget.
Kelly Carl still bears the emotional scars of that encounter. So much so that she asked us to protect her identity as much as we could. Returning to the scene reopens old wounds, brings the fragmented memories flooding back. Memories of a terrifying night 2 years ago when she confronted unearthly evil.
Here's something that wasn't supposed to exist, and it does. It's as simple as that, it does. It exists. There's nothing anyone can tell me to say it doesn't now. Yet 2 years ago, if someone had told me that they'd had a run-in with a UFO, I suppose I would have thought they needed to be locked up.
A mountain road in August, the winter of 1993. It's around midnight. Kelly and her husband are driving home after visiting friends. Suddenly, a bright light pierces the darkness. Kelly's cozy, logical life is about to be shattered into a million mysterious pieces.
We kept driving for about 2 or 3 kilometres, turned a bend in a road, and there was well, I suppose you could say a house-sized craft sitting in the middle of the field. It was, it looked like round orange lights with some sort of blue fluorescent, I don't know whether it was gaseous or solid underneath, that hit the ground in a semicircle.
Even then, the words unidentified flying object, UFO, hammered at Kelly's brain. She and her husband seemed magnetically drawn to the lights, the craft, and whatever lay within. There was a sickening smell in the air. Waves of nausea crashed over them.
The next thing you know, there's a figure standing in the field, and then there was about 7 or 8 of them. Everything really happened too quickly. I went hysterical, I've got to admit it. I started screaming out that they've got no souls, and the next thing I know, I've been hit in the stomach and I've gone back through the air and landed flat in my back. I actually threw up through fear out there, but basically I was hysterical. There was some sort of conversation going on that I only got bits and pieces of. Funny little cliche lines like, we don't mean you any harm and we're a peaceful people. But at the same time, I've been thrown back through the air and nearly had the life knocked out of me.
Then silence, darkness. The craft, the figures disappeared. Kelly and her husband found themselves back where they began, in their car, parked by the roadside. By Kelly's reckoning, the terror lasted just 10 minutes, yet in actual fact, more than an hour had gone by. An hour Kelly could not account for. The question is, what horrors occurred during all that lost time? It's a question no one has been able to answer. Not even John Ockertell, one of the world's leading UFO researchers, can shed any light on that part of the mystery. He and a team of independent investigators have studied the incident for more than a year, and they've reached some startling conclusions.
We try to knock their case over, and in the end, if it holds up, we believe the scales are in their favour. And in consequence of Kelly's case, everything she gave us held true. And we were very confident that we had a good case on our hands.
John Ocatel's team asked Kelly to sketch her impressions of the craft and the flame-eyed figures she confronted. As the drawings took shape, the images from that night returned to haunt Kelly's consciousness.
They were about 7 foot tall. They just looked black. I mean, I suppose like silhouettes. It was out on the field at night, but when their eyes lit up red, they were like red stoplights, like flies' eyes. They were that large on the face that they were like flies' eyes on a fly's face.
Kelly's scars from that encounter were not only emotional. First, there was the unexplained wound just below her navel that she discovered the morning after.
It was just strange. It was a triangle, and it was as if it was a burn, but not enough to blister it. But it was probably more impressive later on when the actual red went away and it left the outline of a scar there. And I actually took measurements of that, and it was a perfect centimetre every way. It was a perfect isosceles triangle.
Then Kelly's abdominal pains began. The initial diagnosis, an unusual infection in the womb, the kind that sometimes follows a miscarriage. But Kelly definitely was not pregnant.
And I was placed in hospital and placed on a drip of very strong antibiotics, and it seemed to clear up, but there was really no explanation for it all, and it was left as an open case at the end too.
Could the infection have something to do with what happened that terrifying August night? Could the aliens have... well, maybe that's too far-fetched to even consider. And far-fetched is probably the conclusion John Ocatel and his researchers would have come to if there had not been this breathtaking discovery. Kelly and her husband were not the only humans there. A second car was parked further down the road behind. Inside the second car, a married couple, Jane and Bill, with a friend called Glenda. At the moment, they're not ready to tell their story on television, but they have given a full account to John Ocatel's team. An account the researchers have investigated and cross-checked against Kelly's version.
They believe that they've seen a UFO, in the true sense of the word UFO, unidentified flying object. They believe they've seen an entity, in other words, an alien. And I'm not saying this is a space traveller, but that's their belief. They believe that the incident did occur in the field, there's no doubt in their mind, and they believe that they were examined.
The same field, the same night, the same time, even the same feelings of nausea. But at one point, their experience does diverge from Kelly's. There was no fear, no hysteria, just calm. And the two women, Jane and Glenda, believe somehow they were transported from the field.
They describe them being in a craft of some sort. They're in a position where they're laying on their back. They can view the roof. They can just view the tip of their toes. They can see a group of faces. There's no speech. They can't see any. They can't speak. However, they can hear things going on, and they seem to be able to talk to each other, but they're not actually speaking.
John Ocatel's team asked Glenda and Jane to sketch what they saw. First, Glenda's impression of the craft. Now, Jane's. But wait a moment. Remember Kelly's impression? Almost identical. Next, the figures they encountered. Glenda drew this, Jane this, and this is Kelly's drawing of the alien with the blazing red eyes. These drawings help make the case unique. Two totally independent yet identical experiences documented and investigated by researchers. Rare data that they agree is unbiased and untainted.
Coming from two groups of people that had never met each other or spoken to each other, and both groups knew nothing at all about UFOs or ufology. It was quite a remarkable occurrence to both describe the same thing.
And there are other parts of the two stories that coincide. Just as Kelly lost more than an hour after her scuffle in the field, Glenda and Jane also have time they can't account for. An hour, maybe two. Finally, Kelly's scar. Glenda and Jane were injured too. But in their case, there's photographic evidence.
What you discover is that they have markings in their, just under their navel, some markings on the inside of their left thigh, and also on one of the girls they have a bruising above the left ankle, like a cuff, something cuffed around their leg.
In their search for the facts, John Ockertell and his researchers literally left no stone unturned. They went to the scene of the encounter, pinpointed by all three women, and took soil samples. These in turn were analysed by two different laboratories.
We found lots of unusual anomalies and also magnetic problems, and also lots of changes in the soil chemistry.
Those anomalies included an above-average sulphur content, the presence of a rare carbon compound called pyrene, also tannic acid, all in a crescent-shaped indentation at the spot where all three women said they saw the UFO.
Also, there was a triangle formation on the ground of dead grass, which is spaced out in the circle itself. So it gave us a lot of good leads that there's something had been on the ground, because the physical effects was now starting to destroy the grass in the area.
So what you have are two groups, two stories, in most respects identical. A strange craft, unearthly beings, medical evidence of physical force. But there is still one more loose thread to be tied. You see, all three women report there was a third car at the scene that night. The driver was a man, a witness who could hold a vital clue.
We believe he's still out there, and he'll be suffering like they all suffer with this lack of memory and this lost period of time, even probably to the extent where he thinks he's going mad, so he's still out there.
As for Kelly Carl, she's still trying to put her damaged life back together, still waiting for the emotional wounds to heal, still desperate to find the missing pieces that will help her understand exactly what happened to her that night in August 1993.
You know, I was a married woman with 3 kids. I was just an average housewife. I mean, now it's ruined my marriage. It's ruined my life. It's almost to the stage where I wonder if I'm ever going to be able to have a normal life, because somewhere along the line someone's going to know that, you know, this has happened to me. Something you can't get out of your system. It goes over and over and over inside your mind every day of your life, you know, you're reliving it all the time.
It's a feeling Peter Curry knows well, a feeling he's had since a July night in 1988. As a young man on the move, the boss of a construction company, he's used to dealing with the real world, the tangible. That night, as he lay watching television in his room, he entered another world, a world of the intangible, the unknown.
All of a sudden I felt something grab me on the ankle, and I just got a sensation of pins and needles running up through my body. I was 23 years old at the time, and I thought, geez, I'm paralysed, and I got the feeling and the thoughts were going through my mind that I'll never walk again, and from that time onwards I'm going to be in a wheelchair.
Peter Curry couldn't move, but he could think, he could see, and what he saw when he looked to his right was like nothing on earth.
They would have been 3 to 4 foot in height, wearing hoods or robes with hoods like a monk's robe, for example. They had like a very wrinkly forehead. They had shiny, dark face. Their skin was like a shiny, black, leathery look to it. Their mouths, their lips were pretty large, and they didn't make any noise or speak or anything like that.
And at the foot of Peter's bed, he saw two more figures, more hideous than the first.
They were taller, 7 to 8 foot tall. They had the oval, big, large black eyes, goldish coloured skin, pointed chin, very small mouth, like just a slit for the mouth, and two little holes for what nose and nostrils, where would they'd be.
At that point, one of the tall figures moved closer.
Then I noticed in his hand he had, I'd say it was like a needle of some type, a syringe, and he pointed it to the top of my head, right about there. And as he inserted it in, I mean, I didn't feel any pain whatsoever. But as soon as that was inserted in my head, I blanked out.
This is Peter Curry's impression of that encounter. He says an encounter with aliens.
To me, they were alien, you know, in the sense that I've never seen that type before. So to me, they were alien. They were from some other dimension, some other planet. I don't know where they come from. But it was a shock to have them in my room anyway.
The next morning, Peter found a scar, like a cigarette burn on his leg. He went to his doctor, and her diagnosis: it's impossible to say what the actual cause was. Peter Curry also talked to his fiancée about the experience.
I was explaining to her what happened, and I pointed to the top of my head, and when I did that, I just touched it, and under my nail there was dry blood. And she had a look, and she basically said to me, "There's a puncture mark there."
Peter's thought deeply about his experience. There's one aspect that baffles him. After the initial shock of the paralysis, he felt no fear, none at all.
I felt like they cared. I really do. You know, I really felt that the emotion that this being was projecting towards me was true and real. It wasn't imagination at all.
Kath Ross also felt an aura of calmness, of peace, during her brush with the unknown. That was more than 7 years ago. She was working as a photographic model, a career she's since abandoned.
The night that I got these marks on my head here, I was just home in suburbia asleep, and it must have been about 2 a.m. And there was a very bright light in my room.
Kath says it was like trying to look directly at the sun. She couldn't open her eyes. She saw nothing, but she felt 3 light touches on her forehead, 3 pinpricks. Then she too blacked out and slept until later that morning.
And I walked past a mirror, and it looked like I had a tennis ball in my head. It was so huge. So I went straight to my doctor, and he took tests and couldn't understand why there was no pain. There's no pain whatsoever. And it took about 3 weeks before the swelling subsided, and it left me with these scars.
Kath Ross says the doctor's tests showed no signs of poisons. Those pinpricks could not have been insect bites. She's still trying to come to grips with her experience. Like Peter Curry, she has her theories. All of them point to aliens. Aliens on a mysterious mission. One they both believed was friendly.
I think they've got a power to calm me down, because that's how I felt the particular night that happened. I was calm and went back to sleep, peaceful sleep. But I don't sleep that well anymore.
It's hard to explain, but geez, it happened, and it's as real as, you know, catching a bus in the morning to go to work, or a train, you know, and you don't forget doing things like that, and I just don't forget what happened to me.
Everything you've seen is documented fact. The people interviewed were not actors. They were the people actually involved in each story. Normal people who have had their lives turned upside down by the experience. Academics and scientists do not dismiss the stories out of hand. There are too many of them. Too many credible people saying the same thing. And too many governments seemingly keen to keep the lid on things. Are there aliens out there? Maybe. Goodbye.